Welcome to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilssen. We feature top entrepreneurs and thought leaders from around the world, those who bring a global mindset and a unique perspective to their life and business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey, David Nilssen here. I'm the host of this podcast. The goal of the show is to connect with business leaders from around the world who have a borderless mindset. And, these people are willing to share their new ideas, innovations, best practices, things that can be applied to both our personal and professional life, helping us to lead in a rapidly changing world. Now, this episode is brought to you by Doxa Talent. Doxa helps businesses to source full-time, highly skilled workers from all over the world. And as a result, these companies can scale faster, increase margin, and improve culture. The most common roles that they help fill are virtual assistants, finance professionals, sales and customer service, help desk, and even software engineers. To learn more about leveraging offshore talent to build your business, simply go to doxatalent.com. All right, well, let's get on with the show. My guest today is Bill Gallagher, a highly rated business coach whose passion is helping CEOs and entrepreneurs manage growth better, restore time, order, and sanity to their lives, and get growing again, or at least growing faster. With more than 36 years of entrepreneurial and executive experience and 18 years of coaching and training leaders who want to improve their leadership and performance, he now works with leaders and teams in over 34 cities and 14 countries. He has led 4 companies as CEO and owner and was a partner or executive in 2 other startups as they grew from the infancy stages to more than $550 million in annual revenue. He's also a former DJ and radio executive. Bill hosts the Scaling Up podcast. And in his free time, he's an avid surfer, sailor, skateboarder, pilot, scuba enthusiast, and recovering triathlete. Happily married for over more than 20 years, he and his wife, Lori, live in Oakland Hills and are parents to 2 young adult entrepreneurs. All right, Bill, welcome to The Future is Borderless.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's just jump in real quick. I want to talk about just the concept of coaching in general. I think most entrepreneurs that I know have not actually hired a business coach. Like, they understand the idea of coaching in the athletic world, but could you just sort of share a little bit about what is an actual business coach? What should people expect if they were to hire one?
Well, look, there could be a lot of types of coaches and a lot of styles of coaching. Think about the sports analogy for a minute, right? You could have a tennis coach, and you could have a team coach. And the work that I do is more like a team coach. There's a little bit on the leader, but a lot across the team. And there's a certain amount of teaching, and then there's coordinating, there's giving feedback. So advisoring, teaching, facilitating, there's a big range of that in the world of business coaching. In my world and my work, most of my work is team coaching, a little bit with the CEO, but also supporting the CEO and getting the whole team stood up so that we can scale without so much effort on their part.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to just dig into that a little bit further, because I do think that most coaches are either bringing a framework that they're trying to install, or they're coaching the CEO directly. Can you expand a little bit further on why, as a business leader, I would want someone to come in and coach my people, my leadership team?
Yeah. So I think that, like, if I just give you stuff, or you belong to an organization, we've been around EO, YPO, that kind of thing for years. You'll learn stuff, and then you try to go back and teach it or work with your team on it. And they're like, you're doing a bad job of it because you've just learned it yourself. You haven't well ingrained it at this point. You certainly might not be a particularly good teacher or coach, and you're close enough to their boss that you can't necessarily, they're not as open to your feedback and input. So having a coach come in and work alongside you and them to help you fulfill on that, get them to stand up, makes a massive difference. Just even in running like a quarterly or annual planning session together, if I start to, as the coach, have you speak last as the CEO, I'm already getting the team to level up. Instead of, like, when you start a company, right, you begin and end every conversation and every meeting. but after a while, you really got to pull back if you want to actually scale the business. And you've got to let them do it. It's really hard to do it if you're running the meeting, and it's hard to be fully participating and listening when you're trying to figure out how to get the outcome and pushing on everything, right?
Yeah.
So it costs a little money. It takes a little more time to do it formally. It actually saves a boatload of time.
Yeah.
Have somebody come in from the outside. I've seen companies spend days hashing over what are our core values, that kind of thing. I can bang that out in vast majority of cases in under an hour get a pretty good working draft with a team, right? Like, I've been doing it for a little while, right? Any coach, not just, I'm not just being swagger Bill Gallagher, but
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's funny. I started to laugh when you said, sometimes it's hard for the CEO to teach. I actually find my team has a little bit of PTSD every time I go to a learning event and I come back and I said, "Hey, I got these ideas," right?
Yeah.
And then they all start to panic inside. But
there's a term for that, it's not so polite, but it's bohica. Have you heard that one before?
I have not.
So after you come back, that phenomenon we call bohica. Bend over, here it comes again. The CEO is going to give us something.
Yep.
And it's going to be unpleasant. But if we smile and nod and kind of ignore him, go through the motions, he'll forget about this soon enough until he brings the next thing back, right? Like,
yep, that's probably true. How did you get into this? Like, what's your background? Like, what brought you to becoming a coach?
So, I mean, if you go back really the furthest, my dad was a college professor and an entrepreneur. So that, like, from a very early age, I remember in like grade school, I was like 10 or something, and I went and I complained to my dad about my teacher. My dad's like, "Well, if you think you could do it differently, why don't you offer to teach a class?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome. Like, I have an idea for it." So I went to my teacher and I said, "Hey, I'd like to teach a class on this." And because I thought her teaching methods were awful. And I'm like, I know how to make this good. I'm going to use a comic book favorite. I don't even remember what it was anymore, but to teach this class, and like the kids are like, "Yes, what are the kids teaching?" And we're going to use a comic book for this lesson. And it was a hit. So I think that's probably kind of the earliest thing. And then I worked as an entrepreneur and as a partner and an executive. So sort of three categories of leader across a range of industries, some pretty successful and some really, really not. Right. Like, I've had both success and failure in the cross. And then as I approached 50, I started to think, I think that this teaching, training aspect of it is the thing I enjoy most. And I don't want to run big teams as much anymore. And so stepping out of that last CEO role and then going to be a full-time coach, I kind of saw it on the wall for a little while now. I've been doing it for 10 years now. So I've kind of found my style.
Awesome. How did you choose I know that you've worked a lot within the scaling up ecosystem. I know that you've helped to design content for emerging companies within the EO network. How did you decide on the framework, and how do you sort of keep that fresh and relevant?
Well, so that's the main thing I use, but it's not the only thing. I mean, I also use the Clifton Strengths tools from the Gallup organization. And I use, scaling up. Here's the thing I love about scaling up. So one, it's about growth, and I'm really interested in growth. The primary motivator is building something. It's not the only thing. It's not the answer for everyone, but if you want to build something, and I like building things, then it's a great thing for that. The second part about it is that it's flexible and open. So Vern doesn't claim to have invented everything. It doesn't slap a trademark on every last little thing and implement it in a rigid, orthodox fashion. He relies on the coaches to think and apply the things in a thoughtful way. Like, every company's at sort of different stage of growth. We're going to talk about stages, but and you need different things at different times. So I don't just launch into execution right off the bat with people if we don't know what business you're in yet, right? So we want to focus on what's relevant and attract it. And for that, you need a thinking, experienced coach who's not only got some experience in business, but also who understands how and when to apply the tools.
I love that you said that. I think adaptability is so important in today's business world. And I think, the challenge that I've had in the past, I have hired coaches in the past. And what I found is most of them bring a very prescriptive, rigid,
Yeah.
orthodox, to use your term, system. And it works for a very short period of time. And then you sort of outgrow it and you need it to be a little bit more flexible slash adaptive. And so I appreciate that you brought that up. Let's talk about the different stages, because you're right. There are different stages in every business's life cycle. So you made the comment that you sort of adapt based on their stages. What are those stages?
So the first stage, I think, is very much about strategy. What business are you in? I can think of many companies like this that needed a little tune-up and clarity on this before we could do a lot of work. I worked with a construction company some years ago. They did all kinds of jobs for all kinds of people, like a typical local regional contractor. And they had a certain number of PMs and superintendents, and they would do your remodel, and they would build some new construction, and they would work on this and that. And then after some reflection, they realized there's a type of customer they like and a type they don't like. They really didn't like working directly with homeowners. They really liked working with business people. And they really liked doing like really nice finishes and cabinet work and things like that. And so they ended up focusing on all business, no consumer. They're not going to do your kitchen, bathroom, cabin, whatever, but and retail and restaurants, because those where the finishes and the things really matter, the look and feel like that. And that actually was key to a whole lot of great decisions after that. Then they have to develop processes, and they have to attract a different leader, and they have to figure out a talent pool, and there's a bunch of stuff to do after that. But until you figure that out, another one, an ad tech company that I was working with, everything in their strategy was focused around the exit of the founders, right? That was the time horizon. I'm like, okay, that's too near term. And now you're just selling kind of the past of the company, not the future. So if you want to sell at this point or in the near future, and all your plans sort of lead up to that, I'm interested in buying the future of something, not the present past. So let's go create a 10-year goal, a big, hairy, audacious goal, like that requires a breakthrough that's monumental. And then we're gonna probably exit some of you somewhere sooner than that, but let's create a bigger future. And that started to change all kinds of ways that they thought about things. So the first bit, like you want to figure out the things like the values, right? But the purpose, the BHAG, the brand promises, the core customer, those are really critical to figure out, because you don't want to go scaling with the wrong customers or doing the wrong kinds of things. So those key pieces, like let's get that lined up before we try to figure out how to have a better meeting or implement dashboards or KPIs. You might implement the wrong KPIs,
Yeah. It's funny. I think a lot of businesses launch out of accidentally, right? And I'll think about my first business. I accidentally found out about this interesting way that people could fund businesses. I launched a business, and then it was driving me for a long period of time, right? So
Yeah.
what are some of the symptoms that you see for businesses who haven't really developed that foundational strategy? Because I think a lot of people believe they have a strategy, but it manifests itself in different
They have
ways.
something, right? If you get to the point you're having this kind of conversation, I want to scale something, there's something there. You just maybe haven't focused it enough, and you can't say it clearly enough that so you're working around something that feels right, but you're also doing a lot of things for a lot of people that you shouldn't be doing and for. So that focus, first, we want to figure out who are the customers that really love you and who are you for them in their language, right? That's brand promise language. And then what are the key things about your operation that differentiate you that we want to actually build over time and lean into? Who are the people that we can afford to piss off? Where could we charge more for things? All that's kind of beginning. So that's brand promise, core customer, differentiating activities. It's that kind of work. And it's about narrowing it and then saying it really clearly so that we can let go of some other things.
Yeah. All right. So we've nailed that. We've nailed our foundational strategy.
Now we have something, right? Like now you can attract leaders either within the company or externally People are like, oh, if I just brought in a director of ops. No, you don't. Like, you're not going to attract anybody right now because you're a muddled mess of who knows what business you're in. But when you get that first bit done, and now you're like, okay, this is what we are. We got this cool thing. We're working on this. And now people are like, oh, I want to be on that team. So now, and like, I think about this with our jewelry business that we had for many years, fashion jewelry business. And we're running it for over 10 years. And then we hit the downturn, 2009, 2008, and we did some moves in that. And suddenly we had a winning story. We had a breakout. Now I could attract top marketing and sales talent, new manufacturing, like partners, new factories. I was able to do all kinds of things in that because now I've got something that is kind of working and I can say it clearly. This is what we're doing and why it's working. People are like, oh, I want to be part of that. Look, winners go to winning places, right? You want to attract winners that fit your company, have a winning story. Yeah. Not be like, well, I suck right now, but I'd be great if you joined me.
Fair point. Well, it's funny you made that comment earlier, and I thought to myself, you will be able to find people to join the company, but will you be able to find the right people? So let's talk about that. So let's assume we've nailed that sort of first phase, the foundational strategy, and then it cascades into people, I believe, right?
Now we can the leader part of the people, right? And that's when we start to want to do execution. So now I want to put in metrics and dashboards around the right things. I want to have regular annual planning, quarterly updates, weekly meetings, daily huddles. I want to put in all that kind of good thing so that the leaders can lead, they can execute without killing me, without burning myself out. And to that end, in 2010, in a year that our company was doubling and adding dramatically, I went on vacation with my kids to Italy and my wife and kids for a month. And I wasn't on calls every day. I would get an email every day with a picture of the whiteboard where they updated the daily huddle items for the core team. And I would get a weekly email recap of all the things from the weekly meeting. And for a month, I could see everything was groovy in a time of high growth. And I enjoyed being in Italy when my kids were 11 and 13, right? That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's maybe normal if you live in France or Germany, but that's not the way we live in North America.
Fair point. Do you have a great story of one of your clients who maybe struggled with that foundational strategy, but once they crystallized it, they were able to attract the right leaders and thus, sort of throw lighter fluid on their opportunity?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have one right now. We have an ad tech company that we're working with, and they did some shifting and some clarity, and they had a really cool concept. But as they got clearer, that kind of thing, they were able to attract a great new leader of sales. And one of the founders, was ready to move on, to retire. So it was fantastic. But there have been many companies like that after we start to get clear about things, the hiring starts to get a lot better.
Yeah. Talk to me about phase 3. So we go from foundational strategy to leaders and execution. What comes next?
Okay, phase 3 is when we really think about scaling in the typical sense. That's actually where it lives, phase 3. Phase 3, we're adding lots of people, lots of capacity, lots of customers, and it requires people and cash in most cases. So for phase 3 to work really well, we want to be executing strong and knowing the strategy. We're not reinventing or rethinking strategy yet. It's there. Now we want to execute against it. So that's where you got to figure out what is the growth model. So one good growth model is acquisition. I've done this in specialty construction, in I'm blanking right now. In some technology companies, quite a few technology companies, we've gone on, well, okay, we're this. Now we're going to buy up all the related bits of technology, all the customer groups, things like that. So acquisition is one. The other one would be sort of like building out. Like we've got a fundable model, and we could use either debt or equity to build locations or servers or whatever like that. I've got a gym franchise business right now that's growing really great, and it's very financeable. John Ratliff, with his Apple Tree Answers call service telemarketing type firm, he did a bank acquisition line of credit years ago and did a whole bunch of acquisitions, roll up, and then a big exit. So another way is franchise. Like we could start to sell franchises, not just be a franchisor, but sell franchises out to people. So there's a variety of ways to start to build that acquisition. And what you think about there is going to determine what kinds of funding you're going to need to do to fund the growth. So we want to think about that. And now we can throw lots of people at it if we need to. Now we could use a mix, especially in today's environment, right? We could use a mix of both internal and external resources. We don't have to think of team purely in terms of a payroll employee. We could think of outsourced employees. We could think of virtual teams. Tim Danley in the, I want to say Dallas chapter, started a business. They put the headquarters in Las Vegas, and he started growing this business after doing a couple of other companies, and he grew it over 200 million. And I think he had 4 or 5 people on staff, right? So they had a ton of outsourced things. I work with a dozen or so companies a year in depth, but I work with thousands a year through all of our programs. And I have a pretty robust team of regular, committed, ongoing contractors that help me with things in different specialty categories. But, there's another 10 people behind me helping with this sort of what looks like a solo coaching practice.
Yeah, I think a lot of people believe that they have to hire directly in order to bring people on.
Sure.
Obviously, that's something through Doxa we do. We help people build these borderless teams and scale up with new international talent pools. I want to go back to the M&A conversation. Oh, go ahead.
Well, my son's company is another one, right? It's a tech business. They can have all kinds of people contribute to from all over the world. And there's only 40 employees in this thing, right? And that, there's, I can't say the number of customers, but an astonishing number of customers.
Yeah. Let's talk about the M&A thing for just a second, because I'm glad you brought up a couple different things. One is, the first company actually I started was Guidant Financial, and we help new business owners get capital to start or buy a business. Most of it's SBA lending. A lot of it happens with rollovers for business startups, but there is this whole other world that most people don't think about, which is M&A and then franchising, because franchising really is a financing strategy. It's a way to scale very, very quickly. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Also great at leadership talent, right? Because we bring committed, invested leaders to the company. So it's sort of 2-part.
Yeah, I love it because you are bringing people on who aren't necessarily just employees, but owners who are helping to expand the cause, right? So, but let's talk about the filter
well, just before you dive into that, right? Think about a company that almost all of us know now, 1-800-GOT-JUNK, an EO and scaling up success story with Brian Scudamore, who's on TV and radio and that kind of thing now. And his former partner, Cameron Harold, who's running around the world also as a coach now, mostly focused on COOs and second in commands. That entire thing is like they figured out how to take their business idea and grow it using franchise partners. And they realized that the key is creating value for the but picking the right franchise partners.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, we talk about this all the time. You can run a business, but if you start to franchise, your business shifts from really running that business directly to empowering other leaders to run their businesses. And it's a very different model. It feels nuanced, but it's actually very different.
But and both sides of it though. So one of my current clients has got a gym business, and I can say who it is. It's Crunch Fitness, and Tony Hartle's a member, and they just sold for an unheard of multiple and hundreds of millions of dollars for their industry. They sold a significant portion of the company, and he's just a franchise partner of the Crunch Fitness group. So he's got a certain territory that they're expanding greatly. So we're all about execution with that team. It's people and execution there because they've figured out the finance part, and they have a winning business model that they got from Crunch Fitness, and boom, boom, boom. I think we're ending the year over 900 people on that team.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How do you help your clients think through the idea of buy, build, or partner, right? The idea of M&A versus what are some of the filters that somebody should apply in those situations?
I think you really have to think about your personal strengths. Like, what are you good at? Are you good at developing people? Are you good at spotting people? Are you good at evangelizing? Are you good at, and I use the Gallup Clifton strengths tools for that in particular. Like, where are you good at designing systems, or like what, and the rest of your leadership team, what does that look like? So we want to think about that, but then we also want to think about the category, the industry that you're in, and what it looks like now. Could we do something contrarian? Could we do something that's not like everybody else that follows the leader, but could we be unique in that way as well?
Yep.
So there's a lot of ways of looking at that, and then we just kind of have to evaluate pro con around, buy, build, like whatever. And for sure, acquisition can be a really great pathway for things acquire. The only issue is it can be a little heady for a CEO to start getting money and start acquiring companies. And you can get so distracted and so in love with company acquisition that you forget the digesting and running of the company. So you acquire a company, you have to bring it into your culture and make it part of one strategy and one culture to extract the full value from the acquisition. And you have to put an attention on running it. And if you just like doing deals, then before long, you've got to sell the company because you're not actually running it very well. And I've had a couple of instances. In fact, I was working as a partner in one company, and we had a CEO who would just do deal after, and then he would kind of undermine some of us in running the business. And he'd like, because he had conflict avoidance issues.
As many actually entrepreneurs do. So
they're terrified of that. So he would sort of placate things and like, no, I was coming down hard on that guy on purpose. Don't undo it.
yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. It is hard. And you're right. On the M&A front, it's the one thing that I talk to people about on occasion is, hey, if you're going to do this, just know that it comes with other consequences. Because yes, you might be acquiring a capability, maybe your leadership team, could be an acqui-hire, but you still have to blend those things together. And that's, don't underestimate the complexity.
Even on some of those deals that don't go perfect, you can still make money, right? Oh. So that company that I sort of alluded to, I won't say who and where and what, but everybody made money on that, even though the full intended vision for the company was never realized. There was some transactions and an exit. And then another one that I worked with, another tech company, did about 9 acquisitions and then sold that off in whole. And that was a good thing, although the sort of the full vision of the company and the way they saw it wasn't realized, but everybody made money on that deal. And another one that we had just 2 years ago raised just a boatload of money and started doing an acquisition for a new kind of workspace and workspace technologies. And that essentially got sold off in parts. Everybody still made money, but sometimes that acquisition growth strategy and the full thing that you have in mind isn't going to turn out the way that you anticipated. That's okay.
Yeah,
you could still, right.
Well, let's talk about phase 4. So foundational strategy, leaders and execution, people and cash.
Yes. Okay, phase 4. Phase 4, I think, is really neglected by a lot of people we think about because of stage of life, because of whatever. But it's really helpful to follow Covey's advice, Stephen Covey, and start with the end in mind. So instead of thinking about, well, I don't know, I'm just going to grow this company for a while and I'm pretty young, I'm only 35 or I'm only 45 or whatever you are, and I don't really know when I'm going to retire, that kind of thing. Instead of thinking about like you're building a thing that you're going to attach yourself to for the rest, think about it in 5 or 10 year increments and think about how you're actually going to get out. So what is the succession and the exit of the company? You build a company so wed to your personality, and it's very hard to leave it later. So we want to put in the right leadership, and we want to develop those leaders, and we want to put in great execution, have a clear strategy on it so that you don't have to run it so hard, but so that you can leave it. And you should leave it, like sell on the up. I can't tell you, like I've had a bunch of very expensive mistakes when I didn't either raise money or sell the company when we were trending up. I'm like, we're going to keep running this for a little while longer. And then it turned, flattened, or even contracted. And I'm like, ah, now I can't do what I wanted. And I have to put all that emotional energy and sleepless nights into turning it around again. And then I can sell it. Like, it's like, sell something, put some money on the side, then start playing with other people's money. Like, so thinking about your succession and exit is a really critical thing that almost no one's ever done. rarely does. And it's so powerful to start to think about it. Don't be like Queen Elizabeth, right? That die on the job in your 90s with your son in whatever age he is now, who's finally king. Start to like develop the king beforehand and improve your golf game or go sailing more or whatever it is that you do. Like that'll make for a stronger team and ultimately a stronger company. And there are many cases, like I had one, people start to think, and they get in their 60s, they start to see 70 and they're like, oh shit, I better get out of this thing. And but then sometimes it's too late because you haven't built the foundation. We had an aging owner come to us, a really interesting company. I truly understood and liked a lot the product and the business and that kind of thing. And I thought that they'd done something really exceptional in their category. So he's like, okay, I'm going to turn 70. I really got to get out. But his team is like, no, they're really dug in about doing things the way they've always done them and not working in any different ways. But now then you've either got to sell it in whole and then they might get kicked out. But they weren't sort of interested in being developed. So that's a really kind of critical thing to do is starting to think about that and build that. I had another one. This guy was getting a little older. As a healthcare related company, founder, super micromanager, up in everybody's business and all the plans all the time. He launched, he founded the company. Now it's hundreds of millions of dollars. It's the number one in the world in its category. It has an opportunity to get to $1 billion, and he'd like to not sell it. He'd like it to be a family kind of thing and pass on the next generation. But there's no function. The leadership team is super weak and undermined by him. And again and again, he's unwilling to look in the mirror. He's leaving his thing to the last end, and his kids show no sign of stepping up to it.
I mean, if you look at the number of the companies that were considered the 15 or 20 most valuable companies 20 years ago, almost none of them are the same, right? It's such a dynamic environment. So I'm with you on this one. It's funny. I tried to sell a business. I knew in 2006 I wanted to sell a business. I waited until early 2008 to start the process. And it was too late because of 2008. And then I had a business I was trying to sell in 2019. And I decided to wait a little bit, and then COVID happened. So, I think sometimes we plan for these perfect exits and these perfect numbers, but I think intuitively we also know when it's time to start thinking about the next phase. So I'm glad that you bring it up.
We thought about it earlier, really early on. Like, okay, I'm going to grow this to a point, and then I'm going to get out of it. And I've got a company now that, like, guys, sell at least half the company now. Like, there's so much money to be had, like, and they get people with deeper pockets and new leaders, and you could still be involved in it, but maybe become a board member.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I want to talk about something that I heard you months ago talking about, which was what you call the 3 secrets for big scale-ups. I mean, the reality is, I think, look, my audience is one that's a little bit more growth oriented. They want to play a bigger game, which is actually what you call it. And so I would love to just dig in there, those 3 secrets. Like, what does it actually mean to play a bigger game in your world?
So a lot of people imagine and fantasize about their company being double in size, and it's really insufficient. And I spent almost 10 years working on and doubling my company, and it was hard work, and everything was incremental as I went down that path for doubling the company. And we more than doubled it, but we didn't quadruple it. We didn't go beyond that. And it was all a lot of hard work. And then we were nearly gutted by a recession. I was contemplating once again the loss of my house and things like that. I'm like, oh, bankruptcy. I didn't end up having to do that. But facing all that, I made the hard choices, the hard changes. And then looking at demise again, I thought, let's not play that again. Let's think about something much bigger. And so then I started to think about how to be like 100 times bigger. And that got interesting. 10x is actually kind of small in many cases. Going 30x, 100x, starting to think that way is exponential, is transformational. So you want to double your company, you think about putting in more hours, you think about getting more customers or whatever. You want to 10x or 100x your company, you start thinking completely different. Like, how many factories and what would I have and what would that look like and how would that be funded and what would the team be like and where would we operate and how would our product development cycle go? And you can rethink everything from the way you fill an order to everything. And from that place, you start to do things a lot differently. And that's where the big breakthroughs are. The other part of it that's really important is you actually interest and inspire people. So like after you get that first bit in the first phase, leadership, the strategy done, we attract leaders by having things clear, but also something winning, differentiated, working, but also the more audacious it is, the better. So when I'm playing to be 100 times bigger and I have a clear thing and it's working, wow, the number of resumes that I get of really top grade talent is outstanding, right? So just playing a bigger game inspires you and everyone around you. Now, the thing you have to grapple with is, I don't have any idea how I'm going to do this. I don't know if I'm going to want to do this. I don't know what if it look like. I'm worried. Like, great, have all that and play the game anyway. So like, when I started coaching, I'm working with, I don't know, 70 people, maybe a couple thousand all told when you get, when you count workshops and things like that. And I'm like, so if I thought 10 years out, what do I want to say? If what I do is help leaders fulfill their visions, right? What do I want to say? Well, I want to count leaders. So how many leaders do I want to count? And it's not billions. Thousands is too small. Hundreds of thousands, maybe. But not actually big enough for my ego. And a billion is too big. So I came up with 5 million. I want to help 5 million business leaders before I retire. How are you going to do that? I had no idea, but that sounds interesting. I'm interested in that. Can you help me figure it out? That's a way to speak about it and think about it in whatever your business is, right? Let's play a really big game that scares you, but you would love to do. We want to be number one in the world, right? We want to transform this category. We want to be number one across North America. Like, pick something, a really big game to play. We want to build the next whatever that is truly swinging out there, and be like, and I don't know how we're going to do it, and I certainly don't want to kill myself in the process, but if you got ideas for me, I'm all ears. If you want to help me, if you want to join my team, awesome. That's the game we're playing.
Love it. Yep. I think being on big, audacious, winning teams is inspiring, and it's a lot more fun. It's a lot more fun. So, all right.
More cow.
Secret number 1: play bigger. Let's get to number 2.
Number 2 is, so you're a domain expert in something. Staffing, software, gyms, like something. Something, some category of something you're good at. And that's why you started the business or stayed in the business or bought like whatever, that. But time and again, you ignore the basics and try to like do everything in your own unique way. That's all BS. There's a lot of very common kinds of things to do in business. And this is true for us and across other execution frameworks, that kind of thing. There's a cadence of meetings and a way to run a meeting and agendas and dashboards and scorecards, goal setting, planning. There's a right way to do that. Stop doing it ad hoc, after the fact, filling it in half-assed, not giving it enough time. That's all BS. Run the business first. Let the customers, the opportunities come after that. Stop trying to fit it in after. So daily huddles, weekly team meetings, quarterly planning sessions, monthly all hands, annual strategy offsite, right? Like that, those are kinds of things. Scorecard for every job, for every function, for every department, one for the overall company, 8 to 12. Now, there's a bunch of like really good basic things, and they're not unique to, they're permutations and applications that are unique to you and your business and your industry. But the rest of it is very consistent. Do it consistently.
Awesome.
And the last thing, though, that I would say about it is you could be consistent, but still bring your own flavor to it. So unlike some other people I won't mention there, we're very much a fan of let's create a daily huddle, a weekly meeting, a thing that has kind of your unique culture embedded in it. Let's bring your culture and your company to life in this thing put some of your own terms and names on it. It doesn't have to be all a bunch of trademark scaling up things, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Again, I appreciate the fact that you talk about it being adaptive, because we all need to bring some, I would say, just personal sort of flavor to it. So, and I
You
think
could
we fight
say
it
good
when we're not
morning.
able. What's
You
that?
could say hello and good morning and whatever else, thank you, in 100 languages. It all means the same thing, but
Totally.
they sound very different.
Very. What's the third secret? What brings this all together?
So the third thing really is get a coach, get advisors, probably more than one, just not more than one for the same thing. So don't have like two strategy coaches, right? If you're going to have a business strategy coach, have that one, or an advisor, have one financial, don't have multiple, but have lots. Like for years now, I've invested in coaches, and it's part of why I'm a coach as well. But I have financial coach, I have a voice coach, I've had a running coach, a swimming coach, um, a cycling coach. I've had, I think I said financial coach, a writing coach, business coaches, right? Operations coaches, just all like the world's filled. For a couple of years ago, for a little while, I had a comedy coach who taught me how to do stand up and write stand up. And I went and did a stand up gig. Like, it wasn't going to be a stand up comic for the rest of my life, but it was really useful training. So
Yeah.
get someone, and probably more than one, and then empower them as the coach. Like, don't argue with them about what to do. And that's like around business coaching, there's some weirdness. There's two fundamentally weird things. The fundamental weird thing across all coaching is I hire a coach and then I argue with the coach all the time, which is a little bit like saying, I want to play in the NFL and I want to go to get a Super Bowl ring. And then you show up on the first day with the new team and you're all excited about it, and the coach tells you, all right, get out there and hit those blocks or run through the tires. And you're like, yeah, I've been thinking about my path and my truth and what's right for me. And my values just don't really align with running through the tires. And I just don't see that's the way that I'm going to get to this. Shut up and run through the effing tires. Like, that's the game there is. Like, the coach knows something about what they're doing. You hired them. Don't argue with them.
Yeah.
You don't challenge them to prove how smart they are or whatever. Like, embrace the coaching once you've done it. And it's not normal because, like, from a very early age, I don't know, 2 years old or something, we start saying, don't tell me what to do. And then, your mom probably knows how to fix your life even today. And she's been telling you for the last 20 years, and you weren't listening then, you're not listening now. We really don't want to be told what to do. So it takes an active will to say, please give me some feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please tell me what I could do to adjust. So that's like fundamentally making yourself coachable as an act of will.
Yeah. And that's hard, right? When you're used to being the boss and you sign the checks, you make the decisions, all that kind of fun stuff. It's hard.
Okay,
It's hard
the
to
big
embrace
problem
that.
with business coaching. Here's the problem with business coaching, right? Now I'll go back to sports first. Michael Jordan had a coach, right? Basketball coach. Did Michael Jordan, I don't know who the coach was. Was Michael Jordan's coach a better basketball player than he was?
I think it's safe to say probably not.
Right. And what about Tiger Woods?
I would say probably the same.
Again and again and again. But in business, we're like, well, I can't be coached by anybody who hasn't run $1 billion company in my category or whatever. Nonsense. Your coach needs to know enough about the growth and a little bit of your terminology, and but don't get a business coach in your same industry or do the same whatever. That's maybe a mentor and advisor. Yeah. And it's maybe part of the overall mix, but that isn't necessarily who coaches you and what it's going to be. I regularly coach. I've coached several companies past $1 billion values now. I've coached people through thousands of employees. As a coach, I'm committed to your winning. I understand your problems, and I know the sort of core exercises and tools deep, like nailed, right? And I know how to, and why the difference they make with you and that kind of thing. But you're going to accomplish more things with a competent coach than you are. But it's not because I have already done what you want to do.
Yeah. You know what? I really like that, because it's funny when I've told people this before, when I talk to people from my own industry, Yeah, I learned stuff for sure, but I don't want to be creating the same things as people in my industry. When I hear about what other people have done in different industries and different businesses, that's where the real learning comes. It's just
Again and again, some of our biggest breakthroughs in the world of strategy are when we're like I was working with a medical company very recently that sold last year, but they were having real trouble with this sort of patient life cycle and managing the flow of the work they do. And in particular, just being in touch with people and managing the schedules and things like that. And I'm like, it's interesting. You say you do that like that. Am I hearing this correctly? And they'd say, yeah. And then I'd be like, okay, but let's think about how it is when I get my hair cut. So when I get my hair cut, she does her job and I've been the same person. And then she's like, okay, so shall we schedule for 6 weeks?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we can't do that because we have to run some tests first to see if they're even eligible for the next steps in our process and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, so how many people fail that? They're like 30%. I'm like, okay, but right now you have a problem with 100% of the people that you can't
Yes.
schedule because 30% of them won't go on. So let's schedule all 100% and then let's notify the 30% that they can't continue.
Yeah.
That's in 1 quarter, the numbers of that whole company fundamentally changed because of that outside thinking. How did I grow a business over $550 million before I was 30? One of the key things I did was reading in the telecom sector. One of the key things I did was reading a story about Subway sandwiches and how they were selling cookies. And I'm like, oh, I could use this. There's thousands of people in this company that I need to influence that I don't control. Like, I'm going to use what Subway did to sell cookies to its franchise partners. Yes. And I might even got it wrong, but it worked for me.
That's awesome. Well, hey, look, we are getting close to the end of our time today, but I want to ask you a little bit about sort of the current state of business. Like, what are some of the key trends that you see or things that are happening in the world today that are affecting a lot of your clients that might be helpful to some of our listeners today?
Yeah. So it's a really interesting and weird time, and it's gonna be clear a year from now where we are now.
But, dynamic.
And so for all of 23, as we're recording this at the end of 23, people have been predicting a significant recession that just didn't happen. So it didn't happen and we weren't sure, but we are for sure still in the muddied aftermath of COVID. All of the turbulent after effect of that big wave that hit us all in different ways. Say whatever you want about what it meant and why and all that. But there was a shock to the system. Everything got reorganized, business disrupted, money got pumped in. Then that inflated things. Now we're down. Then there's inflation and like all kinds of things. Like we're still dealing with the wake of that. When a boat, like a major tanker rips past you and you're just bobbing along in your inner tube, you're going to be effed up for a little while. And we are in that still. So I think that's for sure what's going on. And now we have, just when you thought maybe that was settling down, Russia invades the Ukraine. And then October 7th happened. And like this whole can of worms is unleashed in the Middle East and everything's like really precarious, right? So there's fundamental shifts and people all across the United States and other cities around the world, all the office buildings are less than half full, or at best half full, with very few exceptions. And so there's fundamental realignment still coming. So, remember Wayne Gretzky's quote, skate to where the puck is going, not where it is now. I don't know where it's going exactly, but you should start to think about what it's going to be like and address that future rather than where things were or hoping they'll go back to, there's never going back to normal. There's no normal.
Thank you for that. By the way, so many people say, I can't wait till things get back to normal. I said that
Never,
the normal that you're talking about doesn't exist anymore. So awesome. Well, we'll finish there.
Used to drop people off at their airport gate and greet them at the gate as they walked off the jetway to you. That's never happening again.
Yeah. By the way, this is totally off topic, but I remember actually meeting a friend of mine at the airport. I got through security wearing a gorilla outfit because I wanted to surprise him in a ridiculous way as a young kid. That would never happen these days. But all right. Well, we've been talking to business coach Bill Gallagher. Bill, where can people go to learn more about what you're doing?
Scalingcoach.com is my website. Pretty easy to remember, scalingcoach.com. And then I do a show myself, 2 episodes a week as Scaling Up Business Podcast. You can go see my face picture there, find it So we're 510 episodes or something right now. So something on lots there.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. And I will make sure that those get into the show notes as well, so the people that see this have a chance to come and hear more about what you do. But thank you again for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilssen. Be sure to click subscribe to future episodes so you can hear from more top entrepreneurs and thought leaders. And we'll see you again next time.